the order, don't worry. Maybe.
Hello, Hockey World. It's Friday, October 26th, 2018.
I'm Michael Agello.
I'm Peter Tessier.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
We thought we knew the order. I'm Kevin Allen of USA Today Sports.
And I'm Eklund. You're watching HockeyBuzzcast on HockeyBuzz.com. At least we think you are. If you're watching this, you are. We come to you every Monday through Friday to fill you in the comings goings in the hockey world. It's been that kind of day around here. But we are so happy to have Kevin Allen back with us. And
I got to start it out with a story. I told Mike this story too. It was just such a unique happening. I was at Little Caesars arena in Detroit, and a man who works in the press box who I'd never seen before came up to me and he said, "My name is Kevin Allen." And I looked at him, and so I felt like it was on the old "What's my line?"
Yeah.
Then I felt like I should say, "And my name is Kevin Allen too." But he said, "I have a story to tell you." He said, "I went recently to rent a car, and I went up to the Avis counter, and I presented my driver's license, and the woman said, 'I know you. You're Kevin Allen, the hockey columnist insider for USA Today.'" And the man said, "Yes, I am." And he said, "I said, yes, I am, because I was hoping to get a discount." And I said, "Did you get a discount?" And he goes, "No." And I was really disappointed, he said. And I thought, wow, I've now reached a point in my career where I can disappoint people without actually being present.
Oh, man. Welcome to the club, Kev. It's a fun place to be.
Yeah. I don't even have to be there, and I could disappoint people. But anyway, we ended up having a delightful conversation. He was actually older than me. His name was Kevin Allen, and he had just gotten a job working as a press box attendant. And he said it's the greatest job he's ever had because he gets some games for free, and he just is really, really enjoying it. So now that I've seen what that Kevin Allen can do, maybe that's what I can do when I retire. So.
I'm waiting for that moment when Pelle Eklund, the actual Pelle Eklund, comes up to me at some point in the press box, because he was there a couple times when I wasn't, in different situations. So that would be like another level of that, like, well, wait a second, no, you're really Pelle Eklund.
Yeah, he's gonna sue your ass.
Well, what's interesting about that though is nobody ever called him Eklund.
Right.
Like you're more Eklund, and to me, he's more Pelle Eklund.
Right.
So I would testify on your behalf.
Thank you, Kevin. You never know when I'm going to need that. I appreciate it.
Yeah, because your Eklund is a different, completely different name. So
yes, he was Per Eric Eklund too, by the way. Pelle was his nickname, right? So it's funny. It's really good stuff. Let's talk about hate, shall we? Let's talk.
Well, we should talk about the breaking news for a second, because.
That's a terrible transition, Mike. So
I know. Before
I'm going to throw it out there. No, let's wait on that, because we do want to talk.
Okay.
I do want to get into.
Let's wait on it. We'll talk about the hate thing. Go ahead.
I want to talk about John Ziegler at the end of the show, because I have a good story about that too. So, but yeah, I'm sure Kevin got some good stories too. So John Tortorella last night goes on. Thank God for Tort sometimes. Like this is the kind of thing where he gave us something to live for today. Because he comes out, with a line where he just says, I freaking missed the hate in the game. He's like, everybody's just so friendly with each other. I don't know if it's the NHLPA or whatever, that they're just all completely, just buddy. And it was an excellent point, because, I honestly have felt this as well. And I think we all have, no one's said it, but I think that, listen, there's no question that hockey's a small world, right? And that these players have played with each other. It's hard. You would never be able to find a team where somebody hasn't played with somebody on the other team at some point. Likely every player has played with somebody on the other team at some point. Whether it's juniors, whether it's in the World Cup, whether it's the World Championships, whatever. Everybody in hockey knows everybody else, and it's really rare that you see. And so there is a definite softening of that hatred, which I think is actually a softening of the game itself, because I think we need that in our game. And I think he's right about it. I think we need that. I think we need that animosity to come back. I was remembering, back to when I was a kid watching the Flyers and how much I hated the Rangers. I hated the Rangers. I love New York City. I've always loved New York City, but I hated Thomas Sandstrom. I hated the Rangers. I hated everything about them. And I shared a story on my blog, which I'll share again to this day, which is one of my favorite stories of all time. Which is that, when I was at a Rangers game, I'm going to say it was like right around 1986, because I was stressed out of my mind. I was graduating high school, getting ready to go to college, trying to decide where I was going to go to school. And I was at a Flyers Rangers game, and it was great because I was away from all that crazy stress, and I was able to hate the Rangers and not worry about my regular life. And Lindsey Carson and Thomas Sandstrom collided, and Carson had broken his stick just earlier in the play on a shot, and then he collides with Thomas Sandstrom. And there's a big scuffle, which every time anyone in those days collided with Thomas Sandstrom on the Flyers, there was a scuffle. And Carson grabs Sandstrom's stick from him and starts playing with it, his Sandstrom's stick. And the puck, and he skates towards the bench, and the puck comes to Carson. And I think Carson's idea was just to take the stick and skate off with it. But as he's skating towards the bench, the puck comes to him, so he grabs the puck, gets over the red line, and dumps it in to make the line change. He does all this with Sandstrom's stick. So Sandstrom is freaking out, yelling on the ice, what's going on? Screaming at the referee. Lindsey Carson goes onto the Flyers bench, takes the stick, slams it into the ground, breaking it in half, and then throwing it into the crowd behind him in two pieces. I will never forget this as long as I live. And it was one of those moments that you will never see again. Like, you'll never see that kind of thing happen.
Yeah, but here's the thing. Like, I feel like I'm listening to like my grandfather talk about something that I didn't agree with when I was growing up, that he saw. Like, these guys do play a million. But these guys do play a million games against each other. These guys make a lot of money. This isn't just in hockey. This is in all sports now. We've seen this happen. Right. This is just a natural thing that's happened in sports. It's not a softening of hockey, because if you talk to anybody with the last name of Kachuk, or you talk to Marchand, or a host of other guys, they don't feel that way. But this is John Tortorella basically saying, I used to be able to get my guys whipped up to a frenzy, so they wanted to kill the other team, and now I can't. And that's the big issue here. It's not about there's no hate. It's about his message used to be that, and it doesn't work anymore.
I don't know. I mean, I think I want to hear. I mean, Kevin obviously lived through Detroit, Colorado firsthand, which was like the unbelievable, which was the epitome of this to me. Was what he had, and I looked at the rivalries now, and I can't find any rivalry. I mean, all the rivalries have dropped down a couple notches in intensity, and they play each other all the time. I agree with you, but still, isn't it possible to get ramped up still? Kevin, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm with Russ on this. Like, I don't think the hate's gone for the game. Jonathan Taves and Sidney Crosby have shared leadership roles on Team USA. And when those two play, there's no love lost. The Stalls have fought each other.
Yeah.
I think what has happened, I think this is true, is that players have developed more of a respect for the idea that you can actually seriously hurt someone on the other team. And they've pulled back the reins a little bit, and I'm going to say a little bit in that regard. But you still see, like, I know what you're saying about the rivalries, but I don't think it's because the hate is gone. I think it's just the nature of the beast. There's more teams now. You don't play teams as often anymore. I mean, the Red Wings and the Colorado Avalanche, they're in different conferences now.
Yeah.
And not only that, but you need meaningful games. That's why the Washington Capitals and the Pittsburgh Penguins are still good rivals, because they do play meaningful games, as do the Philadelphia Flyers and the Penguins. So I think teams do get cranked up, and I do think and just the players that Russ mentioned, there's no love lost. But is it exactly the way it used to be? Well, no, but I still think these guys play at a pretty high level of intensity.
I think they do too, but I think that the way to express that intensity has been eliminated to a greater or lesser extent. I mean, first of all, the hat you're wearing, the Nordiques hat,
right.
The Montreal-Quebec rivalry was not a rivalry. It was civil war. They hated each other. They had bench-clearing brawls before games, during games, and after games. They hated each other with a passion. But fighting has pretty much been eliminated in the game. And now, as you've seen from the Tom Wilson situation, if you throw a dirty check at center ice, you lose, 20% of your pay and 20 game suspension, because it's not acceptable anymore. So you can't really hit that much anymore. You can't fight anymore. I mean, I loved watching Sabres Leafs bench clearing brawls in the 70s and early 80s. It's not happening anymore. The game has changed.
Bring back that.
I think the hate is still there. It comes out. And what takes hate to build up is frequency. So the idea of how the current playoff thing was brought around, that the NHL wanted to help form better rivalries because they know hate is created in the playoffs. And the biggest hate on right now is between Winnipeg and Nashville. No question.
I mean, you're right. And in the playoffs, I do see this come back. And part of the reason I love the playoffs is you see this moment come back. Like, and during the regular season, there are players, like random players throughout each team. The Flyers like Travis Konechny, okay, for example. He's a good example of it, to me, of a player who still plays like every game is his last, and he can't, and even though he's played with lots of these guys in World Junior Championships on Canada over the years, you would never know it for a second. He's not going to tap somebody on the back if they make a good play. He's not going to, go into the faceoff circle and give a smile to the other player. He's just not going to do it. I need that. I think we need that fourth wall back. Like that. I don't like the breaking of the fourth wall. I don't like when players, are friendly with each other on the ice. I like the fact that the Stalls will never do it, and part of that is just that is how they were raised, and and they get this part of the game.
Okay, but wait, I don't see players being friendly with each other on the ice ever. What I do see though, is after a football game, players trading jerseys and getting them signed. Hockey players don't do that in view of the public. Now,
or praying together,
or
playing together.
Yeah, I don't see any of that. So I have to disagree on that too. I do.
Where you see them coming together, and it's different, is the off season.
Yeah,
that's where you're seeing the stuff happen. They golf together. They go to the same. They go to
after a game. They're hanging out in the hallways talking.
Basically, Predator Ridge and the surrounding communities in Kelowna are the NHL's off-season retirement home. It's unbelievable.
And different players being represented by the same agent. There's an avenue for a relationship there.
Let me throw you. And you talk about hate, and you talk about that rivalry in the game. I brought up Winnipeg, Nashville. Where it actually is the best one? The Canadian and United States women's national teams. Yeah. That is.
Well, that's real.
That's like the alien venom when it bleeds. It just slices and melts everything. It's so powerful.
Yeah, but saying that, Peter. I covered them a little bit. They're really friendly. Like the Canadian women and the American women played together on pro teams, and two of them have even gotten married.
Yeah.
So there's. I think there's incredible friendship there.
Well, I think there's friendships, but when they throw in the jerseys,
but
I
think you're making the point that Russ and I are making, which is, just because they're friends doesn't mean they can't have intense, rivalries. And the game is not the same as it was years ago, just for the reasons that Mike mentioned, and there were more avenues in which for it to boil over than are now available. Even the way we hit people now has changed. Rule 48, the Lindros versus, or the Stevens hit on Lindros, we wouldn't have that, anymore, which created a lot of animosity as well. So the game has really changed, but I don't see players playing any less hard than they did before.
No, in fact, point out to that, and I know I brought this up once before, when a plane broke down, the Flyers and Rangers back in the 70s had to take the same flight, and they separated the one team was in the back, one team was in the front, but they were on the same plane, and that plane never got diverted.
Yeah, no, I mean, I know for years that these players get along off the ice. That's always been the case. I mean, there's an absolutely players who don't, but there's many more players that do. Like I even going back to the crazy Flyers Penguins shootout series of a few years back, when in Game 6, Giroux fought Crosby, which was one of these famous moments. Giroux and Crosby are really tight. They've been friends forever. they really, I mean, they will get together. And these are two guys that just have absolute admiration for each other. Yet they're on this in rival, they're captains of rivals, across the state of Pennsylvania.
Yeah, but that's an argument in favor of familiarity breeds contempt, because basically, as Kevin would know, in the 21-team NHL, the Adams Division teams and every other division played each other 8 times. 4 home, 4 away. Now with the balanced schedule, it's 4 games for division, 2 games for the other conference. It's almost impossible until the playoffs, until you play a team 6 or 7 times in a row, that you develop this hatred, this bloodlust. And I don't think that there's any way that you're really going to develop that, even with division rivals, unless they've played in a playoff situation like Peter was saying with Nashville and Winnipeg, that you're really going to develop any hatred. So I think the balanced schedule is as much to blame as sort of the change in the rules.
Into it, but like Kevin, you said, you argued a couple weeks ago when we were on here that you need more players with character, that say interesting things, or that bring up some cool, fun.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say with more character. I think the NHL has plenty of character. I would say more colorful. I mean, I wish that we had more colorful guys, and and I also think it's a cultural thing that we celebrate the idea of all for the team, and no individual is sacrificed, for the good of the team. We all like that, but it also hurts the game as well, because, what makes a sport more intriguing for a fan is when it has, colorful characters that you care about. I mean, I live in a world where I know that all you got to do is put LeBron in a headline. We, at USA Today, we just moved someone over to cover the NBA, and I joked that we moved him over to cover LeBron. He lives in LA, and we have an NBA writer and then a LeBron writer. I mean, it's that he's that important, and he's not alone. If you put Steph in a headline, everybody knows what that is, and they'll probably read the story. And they've got a half a dozen guys like that, and we have some guys, like I think you could say Sydney in a headline, and at least the hockey fans would know, but it would not have the same all sports recognition as LeBron. So
no, that's for sure. And I mean, I do sense this, like, more than ever. I'm hearing from fans all the time now, and I don't know if any of you guys are hearing this too, of how bored they are with their teams. And it's just very, I don't know why that, I don't know where to put this exactly. Obviously
I only hear that for teams that are like, not competing because they're going, in a rebuild. I don't hear it otherwise.
Well, I don't hear it at all from Toronto fans, because they're
of course not.
And Winnipeg, I'm assuming, Peter, they're not exactly bored with the Jets right now.
Nope, not at all.
Yeah, and I know that's always going to be with the teams that are struggling, right, more than anyone else, obviously. But the regular season had, and we talk too much, we've talked a lot about the regular season and whether or not that's, it's lost its luster or what's happening, with it. But and the fact, you're right, the schedule does change things for sure. But I really just get a sense that we've lost a little bit of that intensity. And I don't know, I get what Torts is saying in this thing. Like, I usually don't agree with Tortorella, so that's why part of my amazement of this whole thing is perhaps that.
I think that Torts is living in, say, 2001 or 2000.
I do too. I think
and don't get me wrong. Like I said, I grew up on emotional hockey, on rivalries, on hatred between fan bases, on hatred between teams. It's not there anymore. It's not going to be there anymore. The game has changed. I think that these players are motivated. They want to win. They want to win for their teams. But that unconscious thing, that pall that hangs over, that's never going to be part of the sport again. I don't think it will be.
I can give you a stat too that kind of illustrates how the game has changed in the playoffs, and it's from courtesy of Doc Emmerich, and he and I were talking about fighting. Doc was a connoisseur of hockey fights. He started his career in the IHL in an era when they had Willie Trogowitz and Archie Henderson, and he left the year before, I can't remember his name, got 570 penalty minutes one year. I can't. But anyway, we were talking about fighting, and Doc pointed out, and I know this is right on the money, that there were 7 fights until playoffs last year, and in 87, there were 87 fights in the playoffs. So 87 versus 7, that's amazing. And I think that kind of alters perception, but I don't think any of us who cover think that the hockey isn't as entertaining as it was in '87. Last year's playoffs were unbelievable. With the way the Vegas made its run, and and the Capitals and Ovechkin, there was a lot of drama to what's going on. So I think it does alter perception. The fact that we don't have we have to hit differently than we've hit in the past, and of course, fighting just simply doesn't exist at the levels that we've had before. So I think that alters perception. But I think the intensity and the desire to win, which can be just the same as the hatred of the other team. I guess it's somewhat different, but anyway, I think that's the same. I just think the perception's been changed by how the game has changed.
Speaking of the desire to win, Kev, we could transition to this. I know that, a couple teams in the West, St. Louis and LA, have gotten off to really bad starts. I saw a note yesterday that in LA, Rob Blake talked to the Kings, had a team meeting, and there's some indication that, maybe they're looking for a shakeup, and Doug Armstrong in St. Louis, the same thing. Usually that happens around American Thanksgiving, and we're not even at Halloween yet. And I get the feeling that, these teams are struggling so bad that maybe they'll jumpstart that American Thanksgiving deadline and maybe do something. What do you think?
Well, I mean, what Rob Blake has to wrestle with now is was this a complete misjudge of a fly ball here? And I think we're all guilty a little bit,
by the way.
I mean, that I think he felt that this team was still competitive, and when you look at it, with Kopitar, Quick, and Doughty, this team should be competitive, but it's just simply not fast enough. And not deep enough, and it's really kind of grown stale. And I thought they would be able to kind of hold their own this year, and I'm surprised a little bit too. But the speed factor is just so overwhelming that they really looked, to me, as I watched their games, like lost. Like they really, it's like it feels like it's an AHL team trying to play at the NHL, even though they have.
Kopitar has 3 goals and no assists in 9 games. How could a center have no assists of his caliber?
It's really good. I mean, they're just totally out of sync. But the one that's the most intriguing is I loved almost everything Armstrong did in the offseason.
Yeah.
And he's got a lot of guys. I think Boomister has fallen off.
Yeah.
Petrangelo has not played as well. Tarasenko's a little off. Like they've got, and there's always been questions about their goaltending. So
and Parayko's playing on the bottom pairing.
Yeah, it's what a mess. So I don't know. I mean, if you're ownership there now, you're really confused, because I think the perception there is that Armstrong had done a reconfiguration and it was going to work, and clearly it hasn't. So I think there could be a shakeup there. Armstrong is a mover and a shaker and an old school GM who I think can make trades. So. Yeah. I wouldn't be shocked if he does look around and see what he can do.
Yeah, I mean, the scary thing about the Kings is, and Doughty's new contract doesn't kick in until next year. Next year, Kopitar, Doughty, and Quick total over $27 million against the cap. And
but that's really not that big of a percentage against where we're at now. Like, we keep talking about those salaries, but the cap has risen to the point where you can afford 3 guys. It's just when you get in like the Maple Leafs position where, you have multiple guys that you get in trouble. But I think every team can afford 3 big time contracts.
Yeah. And get ready to drink, Act. But because a week out after the sojourn to Switzerland by Kyle Dubas, and most people were saying that, let's wait a week and see how things pan out. That, maybe a week out, Nylander will be signed and, things will be settled down. Well, it's more than a week. There hasn't been any progress. There hasn't been any report of anything getting, like there was one report saying that they were close on a long-term deal that turned out to be completely wrong. Seems to be no progress on a bridge deal. And, we're inching day by day towards that December 1st deadline. And I don't think it's going to get to that point because I think either he's going to sign or be traded before then. But if there was going to be a deal made, you would have thought it would have been pretty quickly after that overture by Dubas, and there just seems to be no progress.
I'll make this point real quick, and then I'll let you guys talk about it. But I hope Dubas is not as anxious as you and the Toronto fan base about this. I think if he has that level of panic that I sense, and for the most part, the Maple Leaf Nation, I've been really impressed with how they've totally embraced this. They're such a smart hockey group anyway, but now this is the first time I've noticed they've resorted to old Maple Leafs Nation sort of the nervousness and the anxiousness here. Like, just give this time. Like, he's got time now. There's no reason to panic. So.
Here's the thing: he may have time, but other teams don't, and I think he's definitely getting offers. And he's, Kev, we see sometimes GMs will go around just sort of, checking on their guys and not really doing scouting. But Kyle Dubas was doing scouting, and he was staying for the entire game. Like, we know that scouts will a lot of times leave in the second period, or team personnel will sometimes, not team personnel for the home team, but for, on the road will leave in the second period. He's
in Philadelphia on Monday.
Yeah, he stayed for the whole game. And so I think he is getting offers, and I do think Ron Hextall is probably giving offers because his team couldn't look any worse right now. And he already put down the gauntlet the other day. And if you think about it, Van Riemsdyk is days from coming back. Simmons has a contract that they haven't been able to come to an agreement with either. You've got Nylander, and I think if you think about it, you could put together a deal that involves Nylander and Simmons and Sanheim and another player from the Leafs. I think you could just put that together.
Here's my only point. Maybe the deal will come together, but if it doesn't, he can go all the way to late November and make.
Oh, yeah, no question.
I mean, there's really no reason for him to take something just to do it now. He should wait and get his best offer, unless someone comes through and offers him, something that he can't turn down right now.
Right. Yeah, just like Trouba did a few years ago. But just like I think that situation is sort of a blueprint where things I think will go with Nylander. I mean, they may in the end sign a bridge deal, but I contend that if he does sign a bridge deal, it'll be the last deal that he signs in Toronto, because I don't think that what they've gone through with Nylander, and he's a great player, I don't begrudge him that at all, but what they've gone through with him in terms of the negotiating situation on the entry-level deal and now on this deal to get him signed, try to get him signed long-term, teams don't want to have to go through that every 2-3 years. And
but you never know. Like, I mean, I agree to some extent that, you don't want a problem child, but you never know what can happen.
Sure.
Who knows? Maybe he'll end up setting the world on fire.
Yeah.
And then they'll see him in a different light even than they see him now, and maybe they'll trade Marner instead of him. I mean,
but I'm sure he's talking to 4 or 5 teams, because there are teams getting itchy. And what if it gets to November and then the Nylander market has cooled off? Like, then they're in a spot too.
Well, I guess, yeah. I mean, you'd rather get something for him now because you're a contending team. I definitely agree with that. But, it's not the end of the world. Like, he's still an asset. You haven't lost the asset.
No, it's not the end of the world.
Like, if you traded him in the offseason, you might even get more.
Right.
You don't know. So,
sure.
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about the couple of games I watched last night. One was the Blackhawks Rangers game. I really don't want to talk about the Flyers Bruins game. We kind of touched on that yesterday, and the Flyers.
There is one thing to mention from the Flyers Bruins.
Go ahead.
I think one important thing. So this team is really dumb right now. And at the end of that game, there was 28 seconds with the Bruins power play, and there was a play where Andrew McDonald pulled down Jake DeBrusk, but the refs didn't see it. So DeBrusk interfered with McDonald, and that got called. While that was going on, because there was a fight earlier in the game, on the other side of the ice, while the refs were talking, Scott Lawton gets into it with Camper and now gets himself ejected from the game. So the Flyers went from potentially having a 5-on-3 to being down a man with 3 minutes to go in a game that they're down 2 goals in. That's not a winning formula.
I mean, that game, I mean, we should touch on it a little bit, I guess. I mean, if you were worried about, if you were sitting there and you're worried about Hackstall, that could not have gone worse for Hackstall last night. Just everything about it. I mean, because he brings up, Andrew McDonald comes back in lineup, and Andrew McDonald, who I really think gets maligned unfairly by the Flyers fans, and I've always felt that, just has a horrendous game. And the problem is when you get maligned, when you actually do have a horrendous game, you really get maligned. So he actually does have a bad game last night. And it's interesting to listen to the Flyers broadcast because we were talking about this on text. We were going back and forth, and I was talking to another my niece about this too. Is a huge Flyers fan and just doesn't understand what's happening. How McDonald gives away the puck on Chara's goal, but also skates in front. He gives away the puck to somebody. That person passes to Chara. Chara takes a shot, and McDonald races over just in time to deflect it past Elliott. I mean, just like one of these like moments that Andrew McDonald will not put on his highlight reel, just like completely. And yet the people calling the game, who are, granted they work for the Flyers and they're great people. And it wasn't 100% that you could tell McDonald deflected it, but it was pretty darn close. Like it was like, okay, because the way the camera disappears, behind a player, you can't really see whose stick it is, but his stick was the only one that could actually, this was like the magic bullet if someone else deflected it, because it could change direction. You saw the slow motion of the puck and it's like going like this and then going like this,
That was the worst game a Flyers defenseman has had really in the last 5 years. That was so destructive to the team that it literally took them out of a game.
Yeah, and then the second goal, McDonald is standing there while, a player tips it in right after the Flyers take a 2-minute man on the ice penalty, which is a bad thing for the coach's perspective as well. There was just nothing, and then another.
It's like, come on.
I know, it's just could anything more have gone wrong for Axel? You had to start to feel bad at some point, and then you sit there and you're watching Lindblom, who he does play. Like we talked about this yesterday. We don't think he's going to play for Vorobyev, sorry. But he plays Lindblom, which is the right move to do. The more talented, more skilled guy takes a ridiculous penalty too, like coming out of the penalty box and like plays the puck before his skates are on.
That was the second time that happened that game because Voracek did that.
I know. So it's like these are all things.
Let's ask Kevin Allen this. Kevin, have you ever seen a game where 2 guys are coming out of the penalty box and actually try and play the puck before they're out of it and have to go back in the penalty box?
No, I have not.
In the same period. No, it wasn't it?
I don't know if it was in the same period. I don't know about that.
Actually. I mean, it was that rough. And, you're sitting there and you're like, okay, Neuwirth is back. He's behind Elliott. Elliott played fine. It wasn't Elliott's fault.
No, it wasn't Elliott's fault.
Halak played amazing. Halak made some great saves. He's quite a story right now that like people are kind of ignoring, right? But Halak
made a couple big saves, but
I don't know. It was really, and so and Flyers fans now, now that the Islanders come in on Saturday, they come in tomorrow afternoon, and if that game doesn't go well,
they used to own the Islanders. Who knows now?
Right. If that game doesn't go well, things will change in Philadelphia pretty quickly. I don't know where. I don't know how it'll be. I don't know if it'll be a coaching change or a trade, but you can tell that you're just at that point where Scoop Cooper, who I love, who sits in the press box with us, says that is the kind of game that changes a man's career.
Oh, that's a good line.
That's an awesome line.
I love that line because it happened when Rathje gave away the puck, and this was the last game he ever played as a Flyer. Yeah. He gave away the puck, and I was walking to the elevator with him in the press box. And he's like, "That, my friend, is a game that changes a man's career." I'm like, or ends a man's career is what he said. Ends a man's career. I'm like, okay, well there you go.
Hey guys, I actually note that I only have 6 minutes left of power, and I have forgotten the power cord on this computer, so I wanted to just talk a little bit about Ziegler passed away.
Yes.
But first of all, I wanted to make a point, and maybe it's something we can talk about in the future because it really bugs me. I happen to be talking to someone who's familiar with radio ratings, and he had some information, and he just was kind of despondent. And I said, "How bad is it?" And he said, "It's incredibly bad." Like he was predicting, like sort of like that we're headed toward the end of NHL, radio, that, it's all going to be, simulcast and all that. And that just makes me sad because, I get it that people only listen on the radio if they're in a car or, there's some place where they can only, listen to it on the radio. But, once we reach the point where we're not going to be on, except on available on the internet. Like that'll make me sad that we will not do that. But we're already seeing that. The Kings made their move this year to I think they're only on the web, right?
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I think so.
You know the Hurricanes, but I don't know about the Kings.
Well, if I'm wrong, I'm sure the Kings fans will correct me. But I thought I remembered seeing they switched. But obviously we all saw what happened with the Hurricanes, and now they just simulcast the television, and that's what this guy predicted. Who's involved in radio is going to happen is that they'll just use the feed. But anyway, I want to talk about Ziegler. Passed away. He was the commissioner or president, I should say, when I started covering the league. And what I remember is what a dapper dresser he was. He wore like an ascot occasionally, and he was quite a he always tried to make a fashion statement. He was when he that's what I remember about him as well. But he, despite the fact that Gary Bettman was really the commissioner who modernized the game and really enhanced the revenues, Ziegler did some work as well. He came out of the Clarence Campbell regime when it was just about hockey and there was no growth. And Ziegler had at least a vision that they could turn it into a more mainstream sport, and he was at least attempting to do that. He didn't do a very good job of it, but he and Wirtz talked a lot about trying to do more, and it was probably the wrong two guys in that era, but they thought they were headed in the right direction, and he was Ziegler was a good lawyer. He was from the Detroit area and sort of understood the legal ramifications of it all. And a lot of the owners in that period really liked John quite a bit, and not so different than now, where ownership is quite fond of Gary Bettman as well because he's made him a lot of money. And back then, the owners kind of thought Ziegler was doing a good job.
Quick question about Bettman, because I've heard some speculation.
You're echoing weirdly, Mike. Sorry.
What's that?
You're echoing strangely. Sorry.
No, it's okay now.
Okay, go ahead.
There's been some speculation that Bettman does not want to be part of the CBA negotiations when they come up, but there hasn't been any kind of hint, Kev, that he's ready to hang him up. What do you think, or what are you hearing?
I just can't imagine that. I have had conversations with Gary about that led me to believe that he's not anywhere near contemplating retirement. And I've joked with him about passing
the baton.
David Stern, and as I think David Stern went to 71, I think so.
Yeah.
Don't you remember to a degree that Bettman, like I think it was during the actual season-long lockout that and if Kevin just fades off into oblivion, we'll say goodbye when you do. Right. But don't you remember that Gary? I don't think that Gary expected to be still doing this at this point. Like I really, I think by the time it came up again, I thought he would be out.
Oh, I don't know about that. I think Gary's a pretty confident guy.
I don't agree with that either.
Yeah, he really has confidence in his own ability, and when it really shows up too, what an incredible lawyer is when he has to make these rulings, and you read his briefs, and you go, wow, I forgot that Gary Bettman is really a lawyer. And we should never forget that because he really has kind of a lawyer's approach. Like all this stuff about him and CTE. He's just being a lawyer on this. Do you think he'll come out and admit that there's a connection and when there's a lawsuit pending and he's just doing what he's got to do.
And those guys like he and Daly, they love being lawyers at times.
They do. And I also think Bettman likes everything about being a commissioner. I don't think he appreciates what happens when there's a lockout because it costs everybody money, but. I think he relishes the fight, and this is part and parcel of it. And I just can't imagine him saying, "I'll sit this one out, boys."
Yeah.
I mean, Daly is such a big part of these negotiations. Bill Daly they really are a duo. I mean, they really are, in my opinion.
I think this is their last negotiations. I really do. I think after this go round, I think he is going to hang it up at some point when they turn the corner on this next negotiation. That's the way I feel.
I don't doubt the end is on the horizon, Russ, but I don't think he's actively talking about it. I think he just knows that a few things left he wants to get done. This last one would be it. One of the interesting things about the last lockout was Elliot Friedman put in his 31 Thoughts back then, put in a really interesting comment about Gary's health. And what was interesting was no one really picked up on it. And when it was announced that Bettman had surgery for, I think it was gallstones or something like that, after, I mentioned it to Friedman via Twitter, and I said, "You're the only one who brought this up." And I said, "I remember you bringing this up." And he said, "That was the only time I'd ever had Gary Bettman call me up and be upset with me." And I thought, isn't that interesting? From all the reporting that Elliot did, he's the cream of the crop. No offense, Kevin, as are you, but in terms of Canada, who we see, he's replaced Bob McKenzie as number one, and that was such a telling piece about his relationship with Gary and what Gary is sensitive to, and I thought that's really interesting, and that would probably be the only thing I could see slowing Gary down a little bit, is if he had some concerns about his health, because he has found consensus with the most trying issues the NHL has ever faced and may ever face. And that is a remarkable quality.
Done so, and I know, Kevin, we've talked about this, but there he
goes.
And done so. And the other thing, I mean, Kevin and I have talked a lot about Bettman over the years. And Bettman has done so with the ability to bridge the gap between an ownership group that is as varied as any group of people you'd ever meet. You're talking about the difference. I mean, everybody in business has what they want to get out of it, right? And that's normal, and that's how things work. But to actually be able to bridge the gap between, like, the difference between what, like, a Vinnick wants to get out of it, what an Ed Snyder wants to get out of it, to the guy in Carolina, you're talking about.
It's a mix of old school and new school that's hard to deal with. That's what it is, Zach.
Yeah. I mean, he is able to get these people to agree. To get the most incredible accomplishment of all time to me was to get Ed Snyder to agree to be willing to miss a year. That he actually got, like, Ed Snyder to do that was just unbelievable. And I will never. We hated it, but he convinced, and that is why, by the way, I'm still convinced to this day, that is why we have a trapezoid behind the net. I'm still convinced to this day that we have that Snyder's compromised with this. I'll miss a year, but you gotta calm down Marty Berdeur's ability to handle the puck. Let's put a trapezoid behind the net. I still think that's why it's there.
Possible.
Yeah, but look, I bet how he's approached things is and sometimes I in the lockout 2005, the beginnings of Hockey Buzz, the seeds that grew it into what it is today, was one of those interesting times, because Gary Bettman took a lot of flack. But the interesting thing about that was he came out looking better than Bob Goodenow, which is an interesting thing.
He is. Peter, 1 second. Now your microphone actually faded out. I think you have to unplug your USB and plug it back in.
Okay.
There you go. You're back. Yeah.
Yeah.
There. How's that?
That's better. Thank you. You're right. Though.
Okay.
You're absolutely right. I mean that.
So my point was,
go ahead, Peter.
If you look at what he's done under the circumstances he's done it, in the economic environments he's had to go through, with two countries, currency disparities, a union that has been in disarray more than once, and through no fault of his, and the nuances of dealing with probably the second most international league after Major League Baseball, maybe even comparatively in terms of nationalities where people come from, basketball being maybe a close tie. I would hire him 12 times out of 10 to do that job in any capacity if I were an NHL owner, and I would hire him to do things for me if he wasn't even in sports, because he's that good. Whether you like him or not is aside from the point. He gets results, and his results speak for himself.
Let's take the most recent example of his decision-making process, because they, after the show yesterday, it came down that he upheld the 20-game suspension on Tom Wilson. And I honestly, I fully agree with the upholding of the suspension, because Wilson is a recidivist. He's somebody who's a repeat offender. He shows no willingness to change his game from the predatory ways that he's played most of his career. And I think the only way that he ever changes is to be very tough on him in terms of punishment. Now, it may get reduced by the NHLPA, going the same direction as they did with Dennis Weidman and going to a third-party arbitrator. But I think that Wilson deserves to get the book thrown at him, and it's the only way that he's ever going to be a player that stays within the rules, is if he's penalized heavily.
Yeah, and I think and he did a good job at keeping maintaining that. I mean, this is kind of like a no-brainer. I mean, Nate Schmidt's thing, that still kind of surprised me. Like, I still think that was a bit heavy-handed, but
well, I think that isn't that written, and isn't that is not an arbitrary ruling. That's
right. It isn't. But I think that they did. I mean,
they're following the letter of the law in the CBA, I believe. If he's suspended for performance-enhancing drugs, I think it is 20 games. So
okay.
Yeah, there's no.
Yeah, I want to touch base on Puljujarvi, because someone brought it up in the chat room, and I do think that there's a rumor there before we get out of here today, as well. Or not yet, at least, put it that way. I do think that we're going to have. I mean, Justin Puljujarvi is an interesting player, on a lot of levels. He, many are saying, this is his third year in the NHL. He should be doing a lot more than this at this point. They've moved him all around. They've sent him up, they've sent him down. He's definitely had I mean, remember, this was the guy that came in, he was the other guy after Line A and after,
he was originally the guy who was supposed to go second overall, and then Line A in that draft year superseded him.
Right. And I always thought that if he was ever available, I would think that Winnipeg would have taken a shot for him, because it's like, if he ever becomes available, because there was such great chemistry between Puljujarvi and Line A, in the past. Whether or not that's needed at all. I mean, obviously, you don't need chemistry when you got a Scheifele on your team. But Scheifele's got plenty of chemistry there as well. So my thinking on that was more before Line A and Scheifele became this incredible dynamic duo. But Puljujarvi, I think, still has some place, and it's kind of interesting because, I think he's sort of taking the path of Nugent Hopkins to me. Like, that's what it feels like, which is an interesting path, because Nugent Hopkins is actually a hell of a player. Like, he is not, I mean, he's not like your number one overall player necessarily.
No, he's an excellent player. I mean,
he's a really good player, and has gotten to be a better player over time, and has improved his game, and is way underrated. I mean, and is really good. A good two-way player. He had a couple beautiful goals last night. I mean,
he had one takeaway that was fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, he's got huge abilities, Nugent Hopkins, and he's a great guy on top of it all. And you just really think that,
Well, I sort of disagree that it's a Nugent Hopkins situation. I think it's one of two situations. It's either a Taylor Hall situation or it's a Yakupov situation. A high draft pick. Now Puljujarvi hasn't done anything close to what Hall did in Edmonton, but this is an organization that has proven over the years to give up on prospects way before they should. And then to get there. Yeah.
That's the problem here. We're talking about a 20-year-old power forward. How many of those actually exist in the league? Forget about where he was drafted. It doesn't matter what number he was drafted at. 20-year power forwards almost don't exist in this league. Brady Tkachuk would have been one of the rarities. But a lot of these guys take until 22, 23. Go look at the moves like Jason Dickinson did last night. He's 6'2", 220-something. Puljujarvi's 6'4", 220-something. Sometimes for these bigger guys, it takes a little longer. If they trade him, they're going to make a mistake. And they're not going to get the value they hope they get, and somebody else is going to get a deal.
Yeah, you want to go down the road of Barry Peterson for Cam Neely, where Cam Neely plays a couple – sorry, Peter. But Cam Neely plays a couple years in Vancouver, and then he blossoms – he blossoms in Boston. Well, I'm not saying Puljujarvi is going to become Cam Neely, but I'm saying with power forwards, just like with goaltenders and some defensemen, it takes a little while for them to get to where they're going to get to.
One thing that's forgotten about the Taylor Hall trade often is that Edmonton tried desperately to move Ryan Nugent-Hopkins to Nashville before it happened.
Sure,
they realized that the Taylor Hall
another team with all these draft picks that desperately tries to move their young talent. they wouldn't be trying to move this young talent in a desperate situation if their team wasn't so dire. That's the problem.
They were in such a weird spot because they had so many top draft picks and there were no defensemen in the years. Like if one of those draft picks changes and, you know, the year comes around and they get the draft, oh man.
Well, please.
Like the kid who's in Florida right now, what was that?
Aaron Ekblad.
Thank you. If one of those top picks that they got endlessly top picks, if one of them is the year that Ekblad comes out, it's probably a whole different story in Edmonton.
Excuse me. The draft that Puljujarvi was taken, he was taken, fourth overall, Russ?
Yeah.
That was before Werenski. That was before Provorov.
But no one, I don't think anyone at the time thought that they should skip on Puljujarvi.
It was before Hannafin.
But did anyone say?
There was some talk that Werenski could be a higher
the point being is,
don't you think? I mean, Puljujarvi.
there are teams that are totally okay with moving in the draft to get the player they want. The problem with Edmonton is I don't think they really understand the players they want or need, and they haven't figured that out in their internal scouting and development part. They've had a turnstile of issues come through that place. They keep bringing in former Oilers from the 80s to help stabilize the organization. That's not where it needs stabilizing. It needs stabilizing way, way further down the food chain.
Yeah.
An organization like Edmonton, which, like Winnipeg, has a hard time attracting free agents based on its geography. Yeah. You have to have the best of the best or be top 10 in the league on the scouting and development side to move those guys up and find things that you need for your organization, because you can't just go out and spend money. And the problem is when you have a GM like Chiarelli, you're spending money on the wrong things. Imagine if Chiarelli had the money he'd spent on Lucic to do something else with. They didn't need Lucic. Yeah. They needed other things, but you think, well, Milan Lucic will solve these problems. No one will mess with Connor McDavid. Oh, God.
Well, just remember this, and this is to help out Peter, too. In 2015, the Oilers fired 4 scouts a week before the draft.
Yeah. Yeah. A week before.
Yeah. Well, and let me just correct, because I made an error, but the point is still valid. Puljujarvi was 4th in the 2016 draft.
Yeah.
And he was picked before Sergachev, or Jake Bean, before Charlie McAvoy.
Yeah.
So
all right, well,
if you didn't, the one
I don't remember anybody saying that the
Edmonton. No. But what I'm saying is the one thing that we knew back in 2016, the one thing that they didn't need were forwards. The one thing that they did need was defensemen. And if you have the 4th overall pick, it's not exactly tough to find teams that want to trade up. And so you trade down.
And to be fair to Edmonton here, I remember pre-draft, before the interviews with the guys, that I had to sort of trumpet the situation where McAvoy wasn't getting enough respect. And I still don't think going into his draft, he got enough respect for what we're seeing on the ice. And I even asked him about it 2 days before the draft, wrote about it. And so I can't fault the Oilers for that. A lot of teams didn't think McAvoy was going to be what he is now.
Well, that's a lot of revisions. I mean, at the time, Puljujarvi was the guy they were supposed to take there.
Yeah, no, I don't think
they got lucky, because remember the whole idea was
they could have taken Tkachuk. They could have taken Keller.
Right. They could have taken Keller.
Yeah, but Puljujarvi was supposed to go 3rd to the Blue Jackets, right? Isn't that what happened?
He was supposed to.
They could have taken Chichurin. They could have just gotten out of that because they realized we don't need to take another forward. We need to take a different player, but we don't need to take him at number 4. This is asset management. I want to go back just a little bit on the same topic.
One sec. Before you go back, the mistake that the Oilers made was, and a lot of teams made this until Arizona, and that's why I made such a big deal when Arizona drafted Keller. Keller should have been drafted way higher in that draft. Yeah. A smaller guy. Yeah. And he fell victim to that.
No. So the point I was going to make was back in the beginnings of Hockey Buzz, and some of us are mods and stuff in there. Scoop Cooper was part of this little group chat we had. Yeah. And I remember when Buffalo announced that they were going to go and use a much more automated system. They got rid of a bunch of scouts. They were going to use video scouting, do so much of it in-house, so they weren't putting guys on the road. We were talking about this in our group.
Jim Benning. It was under
Yeah.
Jim Benning.
Scoop came in and he laid down a thesis on the value of scouting. It was in this conversation, and he hit things. And this is where I always say NHL scouting still hasn't gotten to where it could be, because if you're in the NFL, they know if you farted in grade 9 math. In the NHL, they have no idea if that happened. That's how detailed they are. And that's the value of scouting. And you build up psychological profiles. You build up all sorts of things. You talk with the Billets family when you're staying in Swift Current and stuff. You learn all that, and you can't do that by video. You can't do that by analytics. And yes, 90% of hockey teams have a PCS model that was developed by some guys in Vancouver, and they've done really interesting stuff with it. But it doesn't tell you about the other aspect. You still are drafting a human, a person with variables inside their brain that affect things that come to the ice. Yeah. And that's what scouts do. And that's why to rest to your point, to take that away a week before a draft is not just insanity, it's gross misconduct. I would have fired the GM if I'd owned the team.
Yeah. And that's why like you see some great shifting in the thought process of players being picked at certain places after the draft combine, because all these teams interview these kids face to face, maybe sometimes for the first time, but most of the time it's like the second or third time. And, for example, this past year, the Canadians got sold on Jesperi Kotkaniemi at the combine.
Yeah.
Right. They were not going to take. They probably weren't going to take him until they talked to him face to face, and they loved him, and they said, "Okay, we're done. We're going to take."
This. And to be fair to Edmonton, I ranked Pujärvi number 3. I did.
Yeah. No, you did. I remember this so well, and I mean, no one knows this better than Russ, obviously, because Russ. I mean, you got to listen to if you listen to Russ's show, XM on the afternoons, on Saturday and Sunday, it plays every hour on the hour.
Saturday morning at 9 o'clock. Thank you.
And then again, I think at 11.
It's amazing stuff.
6, right?
Yeah. Actually, it's at 8 o'clock now on Sunday. I don't know how frequent they're playing it anymore.
For some reason, it's whenever I'm in the car on the weekend.
Yeah, it does seem that way.
It's amazing, and because it is the best. I'm not just saying it because Russ is here. It is.
No, I agree.
It's the best show on XM. It's the best hockey show on radio.
The architect.
No, but I don't want to make a point about that. No, at no point in time in the history of hockey has the availability of information about the future generations been as accessible as it is now.
Sure.
Like, you have guys like Russ doing this incredible stuff on a weekly show. You go over the US, so much about the development programs, the kids, where they come from and stuff. In Canada is bonkers right now. When I grew up, we had nothing. As you would have to literally get the hockey news and see if anyone wrote about anything from the WHL. Like, that's how.
I remember the way I found out about scouts, Peter, was the hockey news, like in the back where they would have the statistics from the OHL, and that's all you could see. Like, they would have huge amounts of statistics in the back, and the Hockey Digest, the little tiny Hockey Digests, would have this too, and they would have all these stats, and you would never get a story about somebody out of there. But you might see who's like tearing it up. And you'd be like, oh, that player must be pretty good. Maybe I'll see him some 10 years.
Yeah. I want to also, to Peter's point, we could get more information too, Peter. Believe it or not, like the CHL has proprietary stats. Time on the ice. I can't get time on the ice for a Canadian Hockey League player, which is crazy.
Hell, Russ, you can't get time on ice for the American Hockey League.
How do you make your stats proprietary in the first place? That's one thing I want to know. Like,
it's tracking them, and so they want to sell them. Because they need money,
and stats are stats. But there are certain things, like if you're actually the league, like it's one thing if, like, I've dealt with this group called Stats Incorporated or whatever that sells stats.
Stats Inc.
And they're a little crooked, but they're okay. They're fine. And I know we don't deal with them anymore. There's other companies out there that do it for a lot less than they do it for. But those guys I get, because they're putting all the stats into like a format that can help you put it online easier, and that's worth something to you, right? But if you're actually a league not releasing your stats, that just seems absolutely absurd. It's like, we're not going to tell you who won or lost last night.
But it's true. Coming into this draft, I wanted to get Andrei Svechnikov's time on the ice. 4 games, and I could not get it.
Hey.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean
that stuff's important, and you've got to sometimes sit there with the stopwatch, and you got to do it yourself, and it's hard.
Yeah.
I mean, I know a former teacher of one of my kids is a scout for the WHL, and he scouts basically bantam and minor bantam players in the prairies, and he goes around, and it's super interesting.
Would that be true? Like I love that. It's one of my kids' teachers is a scout.
Yeah. But that's the level that it goes down. And just to think, like, if we're taking analytics and we're trying to build better hockey systems using data and stuff, whatever you want to do and understand players, your starting point is still with the human aspect of who these kids are, where they come from, and what you learn about them. And, it's not just there's God-given skill, there's supernatural ability, but there's something up here that makes it all come together. And you've got to have a way to gauge that. And scouting is super important.
Oh, it's so important. It's like I always tell people who say they watch video and do other things with guys, and this is why I'm not a scout. A scout, and I talk to these guys, right? I'm at events, I'm at games, I talk to these guys. They'll see one player 30 times in a season if they're really interested in them. I can't do that. I don't have the funding for it. I don't have the time for it because of the radio show. So I do try and see as much as I can live. I do some on video too, but like I don't rely it. If I only have video on a player, I won't even rank them.
Yeah,
that's interesting. I really think that is interesting because, and you've seen it, and you really do have to watch what a player does away from the ice, away from the ice, but away from the puck. There's so much to a game, and I've just recently done a situation. We're going to end after this, but my daughter plays in a pretty high level soccer league, and they're all juniors and seniors in high school, so they're all being scouted. So when we go to these big tournaments, there are scouts from other colleges around and stuff like that. And I've had to deal with coaching them and teaching them how to play in that situation when you actually have a scout in the room watching you, because it's very nerve-wracking, for any player to do that when they know somebody is there watching them, with the potential like scholarship in their hands or whatever.
Yeah.
And I tell them what I've heard from hockey scouts, and I always pass the information around that hockey scouts know that it doesn't necessarily depend on you all the time, because hockey's is a little different than soccer, where soccer you can play a game and the ball may or may not interact with the ball. You may or may not be able to show what you do as much as in hockey, where you're more around the puck all the time.
Right.
But you still can't do everything at once, and you can't try to do something for a scout. You've got to go out and play your game. And so much of what scouts look at is how players are reacting to what their teammates do on the ice, how they are around their coaches, the attitude they have when something goes wrong. That doesn't even involve them. Are they yelling at a player who makes a mistake? There's all sorts of things that are happening that that you have to pass along to kids who are in that situation. You've got to be your best person and / player, because you don't know if you're going to get the opportunity to.
The person part is huge now, and if you listen to anybody after combine interviews, GMs and otherwise, they are testing kids for character, and it means something.
And characters. I mean, it's a lot, because there is so little that separates these players. Russ. I mean, the difference between. Yeah. I mean, there are the few players that are there are a few outliers that are so incredible. And then there's a few guys that just don't even deserve to be scouted. But for the most part, when you get to these like OHL, WHL type things, most of them are within like a 10% range. And
when I saw John Tavares playing for Oshawa, I felt like he was bored in the game that I was watching him in. He was still great, but I think he was completely bored.
Yeah, I know. I was in a situation like that one time too, where I saw a player in Hershey that I was looking forward to seeing. I went to go see him play it, and I'm like, that's what's everybody talking about, And he went on to have a really terrible career. Got drafted, but had a terrible career. But Tavares went on to have an amazing career. So you can't take one game, like you say. You got to see them a bunch of games. You don't know the situation. You don't know what's happening behind the scenes. There's so many things going on. But anyway, good talk as always, guys. Great week too. We really appreciate you guys, everybody, stopping by this week. And remember to follow everybody on Twitter here, the whole group. And you can find their Twitter if you follow like Mike in Buffalo, Sportsology at Teddy A. If you just follow, what was that?
Teddy-er.
Yes. I always call it Teddy A. I don't know why.
It's Teddy A, like Tessier, but with D's.
That's what I thought. So
Yeah.
It's spelled like Teddy-er.
Mike's being mean. No,
I'm
Mike's
being phonetical.
Right. So Tigre like that. And at by Kevin Allen, you should definitely be following Kevin as well. And we thank him for showing up today. Remember, you can go to the website, HockeyBuzz.com. I actually am doing something. I'm starting something tomorrow that's been a dream of mine, and I was going to start today, but so we're looking for a new Montreal Canadiens writer right now, currently, and we need more Montreal Canadiens coverage. And so I have taken on. I am going to cover the Canadiens as a beat writer, which is going to be fun for me. I'm going to do that just temporarily while we find somebody else.
cool.
But just in the short term, and I'll have my first article. I was writing it for today, but we had somebody else put up an article today already for the Canadiens. But I'm going to be covering the Habs, and I can't wait. Honestly, I can't wait to just cover a team, because that's something that very different than what I usually have to do, which is find rumors. And I'll still be doing that. I'll still be writing my rumors blog. I'm just looking forward to just writing about a hockey team as well. And I'm a longtime Canadiens follower, so I'm looking forward to that. I'll go head to head with Mike, because that'll be fun.
That's great.
Oh, you'll lose.
Yeah, well, we'll see. But it'll be kind of fun. So anyway, I'll be doing that this. And
Julian's doing a good job so far. That's for sure.
Hey guys, breaking news.
All right.
NHL Commissioner Gary Bettman to make major sports betting announcement.
Well, yeah, because of the Devils. The Devils, they William Hill, who is a company I'm familiar with, they've actually advertised.
Out of England.
Yeah, they've actually advertised on my website. They have a lounge now at the Prudential Center, and the Devils sent out a PR yesterday. So they might be coming to other arenas now after the Devils. That's what it sounds.
Interesting. Okay.
So fascinating, guys. For years, we turned down so much money for sports advertising. And now,
I did too, actually. There was a point where I said, it's getting so close, I am now going to take it.
Well, that's what we did. We did officially last year when it was. But I remember talking to the NHL years ago and saying, "What do you?" Because I wanted to make sure the NHL wasn't pissed off at me. So I said, "What's your thought on this?" And they said, "Yeah, I would stay away from it." I remember that. And now they are here. Have them. They're actually setting up. It's just funny how things change. All right, remember, guys, without the buzz, it is just hockey. We will talk to you on Monday. Have a great weekend, everyone.